Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview Alex Hayden, the voice of NASCAR, along with UMO Trojan Sports Nation. How are you doing today?
Hey, Brandon, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Can you talk about how you got started as a sports broadcaster?
Yeah, it was kind of just dumb luck, realistically. I was working, I used to be an actor, and I was working down in Universal Studios down in Florida and doing some acting down there, and somebody came up, talked to me a little bit, and they ended up handing me a business card after I was finished with a performance I was doing, and said that they were with NASCAR and asked if I'd ever done any kind of broadcasting. And at that time, this was back in the mid 90s, I had not. I'd never done any radio, never done any play-by-play of any kind for any kind of sports. I was just an actor. Sure, I was used to be in front of the camera and things of that nature, so that wasn't an issue. So he gave me a business card and advised me to try to find some short tracks to go out and see if somebody could give me a chance of doing some play-by-play on the public address system. And kind of one thing led to another. I was a big race fan anyway because I grew up in Indianapolis where the Indy 500. I went to it every year, still go to it all the time. But I found a couple of racetracks back here in Eastern North Carolina that were looking for announcers, and I auditioned and got those jobs. And that was at the old Wayne County Speedway, which is no longer in Nahunta, and then also Southern National Speedway in Kenley. I worked at East Carolina Speedway over in Robertsonville, all of that back in 1996. And that was my very first time ever doing any kind of sports announcing or play-by-play or anything. And there was a woman by the name of Teresa Richardson, who was the promoter at Wayne County Speedway, the first track that gave me a shot. And she secretly recorded me and sent a tape down to Daytona Beach, where MRN and NASCAR were based at the time. And they called me just a couple of months later and asked me to audition. So 1997, I started with MRN Radio. So within 9 months, never doing any kind of broadcasting and never doing any kind of sports play-by-play, I started in 9 months and made it to MRN. And from there, I'm still with MRN. This is my 24th year. And I've done NBC Sports, NBC Sports Network, Fox Sports 1, MAV TV, all kinds of stuff. I've been very, very fortunate.
That's an amazing career. Can you talk about how you got started at UMO Sports Nation? Network, my bad.
It's a very similar type of deal. Just on the side, just because I'm one that always wants to learn. I always want to work, no matter what it is. It doesn't matter if I'm at the top level in NASCAR. I want to make it to the top level in everything I can do. That's just the motivation that I have. And I started working some just on the side with the old local TV station here in Goldsboro, Pac-10 TV. And Bobby Parker was the owner of that thing, and we talked about it a little bit and said, man, let's do some sports. Let's do some other things. We started doing high school basketball. They were already doing high school football, so I started doing some high school football. Obviously, we branched out, started doing high school basketball, and then we started doing some University of Mount Olive events, which at the time, obviously, it was Mount Olive College. But we started doing some events, so I built a little bit of a relationship with some of the people there. Obviously, that was just a mere part-time thing because I was so busy full-time with NASCAR and traveling every week, 36 weeks out of the year. But kind of one thing led to another, and then the last couple of years, the sports information director at the University of Mount Olive, a guy named Ryan Smith, wonderful guy. I call him the professor. He and I met and we talked a little bit, and he said that he was restarting things and forming their own network, the Trojan Sports Network for the University of Mount Olive Athletics, and that's all athletics there, and asked if I could come aboard and do some things. So jumped on board with that, and it's been a fantastic time there. I've been there with the University of Mount Olive Trojan Sports Network now for, 3 years, maybe 2 or 3 years doing, I might do 30, maybe 40 events for them a year.
How is it like mentoring young Trojans at Mount Olive?
That's been one of the most rewarding things, Brandon, because they're starting and they have started their own broadcasting school there at the University of Mount Olive. A lot of people don't know that because it's such a new major that they have there. And that's one of the things Ryan Smith, the SID, they asked me if I had an interest in spending some time and working with some of their broadcasting students, and I absolutely did. So it's been wonderful to get to meet so many bright, talented young people at UMO that have an interest in doing sports broadcasting. It's been so rewarding because I've developed not only relationships with so many different young women and men, I've developed friendships, more importantly, with some of them. A couple of them have graduated already, and it's just been so rewarding to maintain those friendships and to continue to help with their careers. And it's works.
Have you seen any of the young men and women that you've mentored go on to the next level like you have into NASCAR or other major sporting events?
Yeah, there's some of them that are doing all kinds of cool things and doing different types of things. Nobody's made it yet because, the program's brand new. Nobody's made it to any kind of top professional level as of yet. But a lot of them are stepping out and doing different things, working as sports writers for newspaper. And I encourage doing different things like that. Even though it's a broadcast major, I encourage going out and learning different things. Just like I was saying a while ago, you can never stop learning. And the better you are, and if you can write stories, that'll help you use your language and your adjectives to describe things. And more importantly, increase your vocabulary. And there's been a couple of folks like that's done that. TJ's been fantastic doing that. He's moved on away from sports writing, and he's trying to continue and further himself. There's just so many different people that have had a really tried to take it to the next level. So after they started doing it and getting the headset and the microphone on to call a UMO game of some sort, that this might not necessarily be for them. So that hasn't stopped them from continuing on. And that certainly didn't stop the relationship, trying to help people out. Daphne Hawkins, it comes to mind, for instance. She's a UMO athlete, decided she wanted to try it, did it once or twice and realized it wasn't for her, decided she wanted to go a different route in sports. And we still have a great relationship, and I still help her any way I possibly can too.
Can you talk about your experience at Moter Raceway Network?
Yeah, MRN. It's we've been on the air for 51 years. Our network was created by Bill France Sr. and a couple of other folks as a way. And Bill France Sr., for those that don't know, he was the founder of NASCAR. It was founded as a way to make sure that NASCAR had national coverage. We had all kinds of newspaper reporters, sure, that show up to different racetracks back in those days, but they wanted to make sure that they had national live coverage. And radio at the time was by far and away the best. Television was still relatively new, let alone sports TV. It was next to unheard of, other than maybe World Series or things of that nature. But it's been wonderful. We have 16 people who are broadcasters, that we have different teams that cover all the events from the NASCAR Cup Series, the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and the NASCAR Truck Series. So we do our best to bring play-by-play. And you got to understand, radio is far different than television, because in TV, everybody can see what you're seeing. So all you have to do is kind of fill in the blanks as an announcer. But in radio, you have to paint a picture in the minds of all the listeners. So theater of the mind is something that's very real. So the more you can use some adjectives and describe your play-by-play far more in depth, the better off it is. And to this day, here in 2020, any given NASCAR Cup Series race, we have about 450 radio stations around the United States. Sirius XM satellite radio, the Armed Forces radio network. So all of our troops overseas or on the ships out at sea, they can listen to us broadcast NASCAR races live. So there's about, I don't know, maybe 1.5 million people maybe listening to us at any given time. So it's pretty special and certainly rewarding, and I'm very, very fortunate to be a part of it.
That's so amazing. Can you talk about how you got started at Wayne County Speedway as the play-by-play?
Yeah, that was going back to what I said about finding a short track to work. Back in those days, the internet was still kind of touch and go. And keep in mind, this is back in 1996. And I was living down in Florida, And a buddy of mine back here in North Carolina knew what I was trying to do, knew what I was trying to find, some kind of short track, some kind of a local racetrack to find some experience at. And he sent me a copy of a newspaper classified ad that Wayne County Speedway was going to audition for track announcers, which is handling all the public address. That was also doing all the play-by-play for the races and also doing all the winning interviews and so on and so forth. Perfect way to learn skills, interview skills, play-by-play skills, and just general commentary skills. And so I decided to answer the ad and find out when auditions were. There were 14 people that showed up to audition on a Saturday morning back in March of '96. And I was number 14, just by luck of the draw. I was the 14th of 14 to audition. And the audition consisted of the PA system was on. There were no race cars. The infield was empty. The stands were empty. It was just Teresa Richardson. She was Farmer today. Teresa Richardson now. She was the promoter that was in the booth handling the auditions. And then the track owner, a gentleman by the name of Ed Radford, who was down in the infield just doing some work, just trying to get ready for the upcoming season. And he was listening to everybody on the PA system. So you had to have a piece of paper that was already written out. You had to read some announcements off of that. Then they asked you to visualize race cars on the track and do some play-by-play. And, 1, 2, 3, 4 on down the line. And again, I was 14 of 14 to go. Each person took about 7 to 10 minutes to do their audition. And I started off reading the announcements, and I got through about 3 sentences. And Teresa just she gave me that tap on the shoulder and said, okay, that's enough. And I thought, wow, I didn't even get to go. All 13 other people had a full audition. I got like 3 sentences out and I was done. So I kind of laughed to myself and said, no way I got this. Might as well go back to Florida and continue on. I don't get depressed. I don't get upset if I don't earn things. The very next morning, I got a phone call from Teresa, and she said that I was the guy. She knew immediately, as soon as I started talking and opened the microphone, that I was the guy, hands down. Now, here's the fun part of the whole story, is Ed Radford, the track owner, when he was listening down there to everybody, he wasn't on board at all. But Teresa, as the promoter of the racetrack, told him point blank, let me be taking full responsibility for this guy, Alex Hayden, because I think he's the one. And Ed finally agreed, said, okay, you're the promoter. If you believe in him that much, go with it. And I'm very fortunate that Teresa was the one that took the chance on me. And again, about a month later, working in the race, that she secretly recorded me and sent a tape in. So I owe everything to her.
That's so amazing. Can you talk about how it is interviewing drivers after the race, like if they win or if they don't win? For example, like interviewing like Kevin Harvick.
Sure. The late Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Gordon, the list goes on and on and on and on. So many celebrities that we get to interview and spend time with as well, like Adam Sandler and Kevin James. And but you spend a lot of time just trying to craft what you do. What we do is a skill. You have to, just like you, Brandon, you have to be prepared. You have to do your homework, know who you're going to talk to, know some statistics, know some things, know some about their resume and their history. And so those are the types of things you have to do. You have to be prepared. And in NASCAR racing, we've got 40 different drivers, so you never know exactly who you're going to talk to. So you got to have homework and notes done on 40 different people. And, over 24 or 5 years now, I've just been so fortunate. I'm really, really good friends with all the drivers and all the people in the sport now. So it's a lot easier now that I've spent a lot of time in it. But you have to be able to ask them questions. And even though they're national, in some cases, like a Jeff Gordon or a late Dale Earnhardt Jr., for instance, they're worldwide celebrities. But the key is they're people, just like you, just like me. So just talk to them. And just talk to them just like you or me. But after about, maybe 4 or 5 years, my dad, who passed away 8 years ago, he was one of my biggest fans. Obviously, he and my mother and my brother and all my family. But he asked me a question one time. After I flew back from an event and we were talking on the telephone, he was asking me about something specific, and then asked me about something specific here and something specific here. Things that we kind of take for granted and in the sport. And I kind of got to thinking about that. And I called my dad and we talked about it, and I explained to him all the things he asked about his question. But it kind of resonated with me, Brandon, about how to do interviews, because I was starting to ask questions then, like my dad asked me, things that you might take for granted, that so many people might take for granted. And so I just started taking my interview skill set and applying a different take on it. What would my dad ask this person? And in my dad's line of thinking, how would he ask this question? And I started applying that, and that certainly helped me out a lot as well. So there's no right way, no wrong way, but you do have to do your homework, and you do have to be prepared. That's the key.
Can you tell me how hard it is to, like, for example, interview somebody that you might be a fan of, like, for example, Kevin Harvick, interview him and know that, hey, you're a fan of him, but also you have to keep it professional?
Yeah, and that's the key. You have to do your job, and you're there because you're being paid to be there. It's your career to be a professional. Do your job. That doesn't mean inside you can't be thinking, oh, man, this is pretty cool here. What I'm getting to do here is really neat, and boy, if my friends could see me now, this would be great. Sure, you think things like that, and you have those types of things in the back of your mind. But overall, you have to be professional. Because the second you cross that line from being a pro to being a fan, then you lose all the respect of the person you're interviewing, and they won't give you good content after that. So the key is be professional, but it's also okay to have some fun. It's okay to have some personality in there, but just don't cross that line from being a pro that's having fun to being just a fan.
Is it more easier whenever you're not interviewing a driver? Like, for example, say Kevin Harvick, like, for example, he might not be racing that day. You might be, like, on a break, be like, hey, Kevin Harvick, let's go, like, play golf, you know?
Yeah, because like I say, we're all friends, and it's a mutual respect. They understand that I have a job to do. I understand that they have a job to do, but we need the drivers, obviously, to have a sport. But the drivers also understand they need us. They need television, live television. They need live radio, because we're the ones that are bringing their sport and their talent to the country and to the world. So they understand that they need us. They also understand with the sponsorship, with corporations that they're being spokespersons for, they need us to continue to get their product out there. So it's a mutual relationship, a mutual respect professionally. But yeah, when we're not doing something, for instance, if we're a Saturday and we get rained out at a racetrack and we know we got to be there on Sunday anyway, it's not unusual at all to pick up the phone and text or call and say, hey, let's go play golf, or hey, let's go, let's go mountain biking, or let's go rent a boat at this lake that we're at over here in Arizona and go do something like that. That happens all the time to this day, and very fortunate, because with NASCAR, unlike football or basketball or baseball or hockey, racing and golf and professional tennis, we're kind of on our own island. We don't have home games. So half of our schedule is not played at home. Like, for instance, if you think about the Cincinnati Reds baseball team, half of their 162 game schedule is played at home in Cincinnati. So in racing and just like PGA Tour and in professional tennis, you can even put in the PBA bowling tour in there, we have to go track to track to track all around the country. And we're basically like a traveling circus, if you will. It's the people in the sport themselves. We show up like we were in Pocono, Pennsylvania this past weekend. We go to Indianapolis this coming weekend. The schedule just goes on and on and on. Well, we come home for a couple of days. We're home Monday afternoon, Tuesday and Wednesday, and sometimes Thursday. And then we either fly out to wherever we're going on Thursday or Friday morning. And we spend the entire weekend together. We spend as much time with each other in the sport almost as we do with our families back home.
Can you talk about your experience being the pit turn announcer?
Yeah. So we have 3 positions with the Motor Racing Network, MRN Radio. There's the booth, which is there's 2 people in the booth that are anchors, which is what I am now. I'm one of the anchors of the broadcast, me and Jeff Striegel, the 2. And then NASCAR Hall of Famer Rusty Wallace joins us up there as the expert analyst. And then we have pit reporters as well. And then we have turn positions. We have actual people on wireless radio gear out around the racetrack in the turns. And we do play-by-play. So when the race cars go off into turn number 1, we in the booth will call the play-by-play until they get there, and then what we call drop it. The person in turn one then picks it up and does the play-by-play, and they'll drop it over on the backstretch for the next person to do play-by-play in turns 3 and 4, and then it comes back to the booth. We literally follow the cars around the racetrack doing play-by-play. And then the pit reporters are down there. They do all the pre-race interviews before we start an event. They do all the victory lane and all the post-race interviews. They also do all the play-by-play live pit stops. Pit folks are responsible for finding out during a race what the strategies are, what the scenarios are, if somebody's having a problem with their race cars. Much the same, like for the Trojan Sports Network, we may have sideline reporters, and you see that on television for football, basketball, baseball type games. They have sideline reporters down there. Their job is to kind of bring inside information on what's happening back to the broadcast. No different than pit reporters in racing. So that's kind of how it works. And I've worked all 3 positions for MRN over the 24 years, but I am now one of the anchors of the broadcast.
How is it like to broadcast the basketball and football game for Wayne County in 2006 to 2019?
Yeah,
I mean, 2006 to 2010, my bad.
No, all good. All good. Yeah, I got to do a lot of high school sports, but I did it in the exact same way I'll do a NASCAR race on NBC television like I've done. I treat our high school athletes like when we did that, no different than the way I treated, no different than the way I treated a Jeff Gordon or a Dale Earnhardt Jr., whoever. To me, they are the star of the show. Whoever's performing, and that would be a high school football player, a high school basketball player, or a race car driver. It doesn't matter. Whoever's performing, they're the star of the show. That's why people are watching. That's why people are listening. So I took it and approached it the exact same way. Bring a high level of preparation, a high level of professionalism to a high school basketball game. I take the exact same approach as I do that to call it Wayne and Rosewood football game as I do the Daytona 500. And I think it only deserves it. That respect level needs to be there because they're racing and working hard on the football field, racing hard on the racetrack, on the basketball court, whatever the case may be. Same with the University of Mount Olive, whether it's lacrosse or softball or track and field or cross country, any of those events, including basketball and baseball, clearly, you have to approach it the same way because those people deserve the same level of respect as athletes in their craft. More importantly, and here's the biggest thing about doing high school sports or even the college sports, is those parents are watching. They're paying very close attention. So if you say anything at all that might be crossways or even pronounce a name wrong, believe me, the parents will be the first ones to let you know. But hey, that's part of the fun, and that's how you learn.
How is the process like at Trojan on a day-to-day basis when you do the announcing?
Typically, they ask you to be there. What's called a crew call. That's what time you're supposed to be on site. So if we're going to be doing a University of Mount Olive basketball game and it tips off, if the girls game tips off at 5:30, the boys game at 7:30, we need to be there an hour ahead of time, an hour out of broadcast time. So 5:30 is the tip off. We'll go on the air at 5:15. So the crew call will be at 4:15. I tend to get there earlier. An hour is what they require, but I tend to try to get there maybe 2 hours ahead of time because I want to go and I want to talk to the coaches and I want to talk to some of the athletes and I want to find out some inside stories because while my job is to bring the play-by-play and what's going on, to me, I can elevate that experience and tell a story. If say Brandon, a basketball player at UMO, had to go back home because his grandmother was ill, but came back to be a part of the game. And oh, by the way, he had 2 exams to take. That's a heck of a story to try to tell what a student athlete may do on any given day or any given week. And to bring that to somebody and fill in a little bit of blank to some people about stories that some of these young people are doing, then that's what I like to do. And you have to do that in advance of the broadcast, obviously. So I try to get there a couple of hours ahead of time.
That's amazing that you go all the way out of your way to help athletes like that.
Well, I appreciate that, but it's the golden rule. I want to treat people the way I want to be treated, and if somebody's got a great story, I want to tell it. The bottom line is all of us have stories. You have your own story. I have mine. Everybody has their own story. Sometimes they just have a little bit of extraordinary aspects to them that just need to be told to a wider audience. And sometimes they don't. And that's part of the broadcaster's job, is to kind of filter through and say, okay, you know what? He had a test this morning. He didn't feel so good about it, but he had a game today. That's not necessarily all that extraordinary. But if somebody had an exam, then they had to go and work for a couple of hours. Then they had to come back and train to get ready for the game. So then they had to do different types of things, for instance. That seems a little bit more intense, a little more extraordinary to be able to tell that story. So you kind of have to have a filter for what you're wanting to do.
Can you talk about how a fan like me could meet Kevin Harvick and the whole pit stop thing?
Yeah,
the pit pass?
Absolutely. It's a little different right now here in 2020, as we all know. No fans allowed at the racetracks. That means no extra passes or anything is being allowed to be given out. However, we hope soon, maybe later this year, maybe not, maybe 2021, whenever we get back to normal. Most racetracks, you can actually buy a hot pass, what's called a hot pass, to get you into the garage. Now, it all depends. You can sometimes only buy them for practice days, not necessarily for race day. Or you have to know somebody that's affiliated with a race team that can get you one of those passes. And if you get one, then you can just wander around and in the garage or out on pit lane, and you'll run into these drivers. You'll run into these people. NASCAR drivers and teams are very accessible to race fans, and they walk around just like the rest of us. The key is, you got to know what they look like in a pair of blue jeans and a t-shirt when they're not in their racing uniform, because you can see some of the most popular drivers out there. For instance, Chase Elliott right now. You can see Chase Elliott in his uniform and everybody knows who he is. You see Chase Elliott in a t-shirt and a pair of shorts walking through the garage, 99% of the people have no idea who he is. And that's how a lot of these drivers do it. They're accessible, but you got to know what they look like by their face, not necessarily by their uniform. So that's usually how you got to do it. You got to know somebody in the sport, or find a practice day and a track that actually sells hot passes.
What advice would you give upcoming sports broadcasters looking to get into the profession?
A couple of different things really stand out, because I've been mentored and I've been talked to a lot by a lot of close friends and a lot of big time broadcasters out there. And for instance, Eli Gold, who is the national champion voice of the University of Alabama Crimson Tide football team, just a dear personal friend of mine. One of the first things he told me, because I've worked with him, because he used to be with us at MRN, and one of the first things he told me point blank is you have to do your homework. Be prepared. And that just doesn't mean know who the athletes are. That means know their stories, know their families' names, know where they came from, know how they got to where they're at. Be prepared on the athletes. Then be prepared on the event. For instance, like we're racing at Indianapolis in the Brickyard 400 this weekend. You got to know that the first Brickyard 400, know the history about it. 1994 was the first Brickyard 400. But that's at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, for instance, which that was built back in 1909. The first Indy 500 was run back in 1911 and won by a gentleman named Ray Haroon. And then you just kind of take it and build on that and tell stories. Ray Haroon, who won that first Indy 500, is the person that invented a rear view mirror on a car. He put it on his race car so he could see behind me. All the other competitors in the 1911 Indy 500, because they didn't know anything about a rear view mirror, it wasn't invented, they had somebody ride beside them that constantly looked backwards to see who was coming up, if they're on the right or the left. Well, he wanted to lighten the weight of the race car by taking out a 200-pound person, keep himself in there. That lightens the race car, makes it go faster, and realized if he just took a mirror from home and mounted it on his car, he would be able to see behind him and take care of that issue. So the very first rear view mirror was invented in 1911 in the Indy 500, just happened to be the race winner, Ray Haroon, in the Marmon Wasp, the number 32 car. See what I mean? You have to learn all these things about the history, and that's how you prepare yourself. So that would be the first thing I give as far as advice goes. Prepare yourself for what event you're going at, whether it's basketball, football, baseball, whatever the broadcast is or the event that you're going to do, know about it. Try to know all the rules about it. And then I would say one of the other biggest pieces of advice I would give, I'll give you two more. One of them is listen, because rarely do you broadcast an event by yourself. More times than not, if it's just a regular sporting event, not racing, but a regular sporting event, you'll have a play-by-play person and an analyst. So you're always going to have a minimum of two people. Sometimes you have the sideline reporter, so you have to have three in there. Listen to what they say. Even though you're there to talk, you have to listen to what your analyst is saying. That way you can feed off of that and paint a better picture. Listen to what your sideline reporter is saying. Feed off of that. That way you and your analyst can talk about that and expand on what your sideline reporter said. So do your homework, listen, and the third biggest thing is be yourself. Because while Jim Nantz is one of the greatest of all time, or Al Michaels, one of the greatest sports broadcasters of all time, there's only one of them. There's only one Al Michaels. There's only one Jim Nantz. There's only one Joe Buck. Be yourself. Don't come up trying to be another Jim Nantz. The world's already got one. Now, be Brandon. Be Alex Hayden. There's only one Alex Hayden sports broadcaster, so be yourself. So those are the main three things I would tell anybody. Be prepared and do your homework. Have fun with it and be yourself. And then also listen. That's so important to do.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
So yeah, Twitter, I'm verified on Twitter. So I have the blue check mark. If there's a lot of Alex Haydens out there, and that's flattering, but make sure you have the blue check mark on Twitter. It's at the Alex Hayden, TheAlexHayden, at the Alex Hayden. I tried to get at Alex Hayden back in 2009 when I joined Twitter, but believe it or not, it was taken by a comic book character. Who knew? So I'm the Alex Hayden on Twitter. I'm the Alex Hayden on Instagram. I'm the Alex Hayden on Snapchat, all of it. You can find me everywhere at the Alex Hayden. And in today's social media world, much like you understand, Brandon, you got to have it consistent, because you can't have one, like your Twitter handle can't be different from your Instagram, which can't be different from your Snapchat or whatever the case. That makes it too hard for people to follow along. If you make it the same one across the board, everybody can follow you at every different level.
Thank you again for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
Very
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Alex Hayden, for your interview, and best of luck.
Brandon, you're the best. Thank you so much for having me on.